Part 1. Heroes and Boasters. The history of any public character involves not only the facts about him, but what the public has taken to be facts. J. Frank Dobby. The heroic spirit, as seen in heroic poetry, we are told is the outcome of society cut loose from its roots, of a time of migrations and of the shifting of populations. John G. Nearhart. Bragging saves advertising. Sam Slick. Part 1. Backwoods Boasters. The backwoodsman is a soldier from necessity. Mind and body have been disciplined in a practical warfare. He belongs to this continent and no other. He is an original. He thinks big and talks big, and when it is necessary to toe the mark, he acts big. He is the genius of the New World. James K. Paulding. These are the untamable. America has always been second in the production of the roughs. Leonard Devoto. 1. The Irrepressible Backwoodsman. Hero tales tell us more about a people than perhaps any other tales, for as admirable and exceptional men, heroes embody the qualities that we most admire or desire in ourselves. So we begin with the heroes in our most potent folk symbols and most reliable touchstones of a people's choice. In every age, heroes arise from a people's dream of greatness or from homage to the great and near great. In other times and places, heroes receive their sanction from religion or mythology as they derive their being, or their powers from a world other than our own. Lacking a body of true myth and ritual, Americans conceive of their heroes, save for vague demigods of the Paul Bunyan type, as strictly of this world, however much they may take us out of it. In modern times, especially in a democracy, hero myths and hero worship have become inextricably mixed. For the universal need of models larger than life, or desire to be ruled by strength and ability, Americans choose or create heroes in their own image. In a complex industrial society, hero-making goes on all various levels, so that every walk of life and almost every occupation have their heroes. Especially, however, American heroes are of three main types: the poor boy who makes good, the good boy gone wrong, and the kind that is too good or too bad to be true. Thus, on one hand, the school books and the popular literature of edification draw upon the ranks of leaders, explorers, pioneers, soldiers, statesmen, inventors, and industrialists, for patron saints and tutelary geniuses to inspire love of country or teach the ethics of success. On the other hand, the dime novel, concealed behind a geography book, glorifies a gentleman on horseback and the demons with a six-shooter. Midway between these two extremes is the American fairyland of strong men and giants who perform the impossible. A composite picture of the American hero would show him to be a plain, tough, practical fellow, especially good at a bargain or fight, a star performer on the job, and a hellraiser often, and sometimes a salesman or showman with a flair for the prodigious stories, jokes, and stunts, and a general capacity for putting himself over. Our nearest approach to a national myth, explaining and justifying the many contradictions of our heroes, is the frontier or pioneer myth. This reconciles the primitive virtues of brute strength, courage, and cunning with the economic virtues of thrift, hard work, and perseverance. The backwoodsman was the first of our tall men, whose words were tall and whose deeds were tall tales. Romantic fiction has made much of his fierce, wild courage and independence and his rough diamond of chivalry, as well as his skill with a rifle. That murderous weapon, wrote Audubon of the Kentucky Hunters, is a means of procuring the substance during all their wild and extensive rambles, and is the source of their principal sports and pleasures. It has also brought them into the national prominence in the Battle of New Orleans, January 8th of 1815. Tough as hickory, these coonskin voters helped put Old Hickory in the White House 13 years later. In May 1822, 7 years after the battle, before a New Orleans audience of stamping, clapping, whooping boatsmen, Gilman boatsmen, to whom had fought under Jackson, Noah Ludlow, the comedian, sang a song which marked the passing of the backwoodsman from history into legend. This was The Hunters of Kentucky. By this time, too, the backwoodsman had emerged into the later phases. Like Mike Fink, the hunter who became a riverman, and beyond the Mississippi, flowing his free, wild way of living, he was to revert once more, like Mike Fink, to hunting and trapping. In pursuit of game, skins, scalps, land, or adventure, the backwoodsman followed the shifting fringe of settlements, marching ahead of civilization or running away from it. As a picturesque type, the footloose adventurer, he illustrates what Lucy Lockwood Hazard calls the dwindling of a hero, from the godlike or kinglike to the average human or subhuman level. 2. Lion of the West. More and more, as the country was settled, the backwoodsman motto became, in the words of the picturesque Simon Suggs, "It is good for a man to be shifty in a new country." To be shifty in a new country meant beating the other fellow to it. For a society that cannot support a large population puts a premium on outdoing, outrunning, outlicking, and outhollering one's neighbor. Men with the bark on must also be the men with the gumption and gusto who could walk as well as who could talk, as well as walk, tall into the scrapes, rows, and sprees. Boasting, the epic brag, has always been part of the trappings of the hero. The strong man of the Beowulf type, or the medieval knight, would gird himself for combat and inspired confidence in his followers by rehearsing his exploits and big talk. In the Paradise of Puffers, however, the backwoods boaster tended to boast in terms of the future rather than of the past, and seemed more interested in making claims than living up to them. Moreover, since boasting, like bombast, contains in itself the seeds of its own travesty, it became hard to distinguish bragging from windy laughing and bragging, and serious from mock and burlesque boasts. From his noise, the boaster became known as a roarer or screamer. Because the qualities of the horse and the alligator seemed almost as fitting the animal antics than those of the ring-tailed roarer, the alligator horse, or half-horse, half-alligator, became their emblem. It is an old remark, criticizes Washington Irving, that persons of Indian mixture are half civilized, half savage, and half devil, the third half being provided for their particular convenience. It is the similar reasons, and probably the equal truth, that the backwoodsmen of Kentucky are styled half men, half horse, and half alligator, by the settlers on the Mississippi, and held accordingly in great respect and abhorrence. Perhaps the best literary description we have seen of the strange breed in action is Robert Montgomery Bird's portrayal of the Salt River Roarer. Roaring rash stockpole, rascally horse thief, and stentorian braggart, in Nick of the Woods, 1853. Like the first successful Yankee character, Jonathan, in Royal Tyler's Contrast, 1787, the first full-length portrait of the ring-tailed roarer was a stage production. This was Colonel Nimrod Wildfire, the hero of James K. Paulding's Lost Prize Day, The Lion of the West, which was produced at the Park Theater, New York City, on April 25, 1831. The role of Colonel Wildfire, a raw Kentuckian recently elected to Congress, was to be responsible for the names of the play and the hero. Wildfire was acclaimed as a contribution to the gallery of Native American types, along with Hackett's Solomon's Swap, and though two rewritings of the play over a period of 20 years, remained one of the most successful roles of an actor's career. The one surviving speech of the play appears in several newspaper, almanac, and joke book versions, attributed now to Colonel Wildfire and now to the meter David Crockett, who in 1831 was nearing the end of his second term in Congress. According to Paulding's son and biographer, the playwright disclaimed any intention to take off of that well-known personage, eliciting from him the following reply. "Sir, your letter is of 15 inst. was handed to me this day by a friend of Mr. Wilde. Newspaper publications which you prefer I've never seen, and if I should have been taking in reference myself in exclusion of many who fill offices and who are as untaught as I am, I thank you, however, for your civility in assuring me that you had no reference to my peculiarities. The frankness of your letter introduces me to say a declaration from you to the effect that it was not necessary to convince me that you are incapable of wounding the feelings of a strangler or unlettered man who had never injured you. Your character for letters and as a gentleman is not altogether unknown to me. I have great honor and respects. David Crockett. Whatever Pauldring's intentions, the actor's interpretation and the public's acceptance of Wildfire must have profited by a resemblance between the two lines of the West, even to Crockett's taking a bow at the performance of the play. Thus, the wood engraving of Crockett on the cover of the 1837 Almanac is virtually indistinguishable from the cut of Hackett in the role of Wildfire. Following the Crockett version of the Wildfire speech, the author of Sketches and Eccentricities of Colonel David Crockett of West Tennessee, 1833, has this to say about the play. This scene, with some slight alteration, has been attributed to understand an imaginary character, Colonel Wildfire. This I have not seen, but I am unwilling that the hard earnings of Crockett should be given to another. Such curious coincidences and correspondences illustrate the way in which folklore become mixed with life and literature, and also to point to the fact that many Crockett stories may have had their source in current anecdotes and been identified with other characters. David Crockett. If the prevailing rusticity of American folk heroes may be said to constitute one of their chief attractions, then none of them is more attractive than Davy Crockett, the prime example of the country boy who made it good. Crockett was rude and uncouth, writes one of his admirers, but honest and heroic. To a homely sense of the backwoodsman, he joined in spirit as brave and chivalrous as any that followed the banner of Black Prince against infidel. His rise to fame serves as a peg on which to hang the moral. You can't keep a good man down. It is certainly a very curious phase of American, especially of Western character, which is exhibited in the ease and promptness of which the calm passes from one act of singular dreams of life to another. Yesterday, a rough bear hunter, today a member of the legislature, tomorrow about to be a member of Congress, and the fearless opponent of his old commander, General Jackson. Such sudden and successful advances in life are scarcely seen except in our country, where perfect freedom opens a boundless field to enterprise and perseverance. Although in his own day Crockett's name was a household word for his jokes as well as his achievements, the image of the colonel that endures today is not that of a national political figure or the martyr of the Alamo, but that of a comic woodsman. While historians of the Alamo epic may, with Frank Norris, deplore the fact that Crockett is a hero only in a funny story about a sagacious coon, the epic's loss is humor's gain. The transformation of this prototype from the folks of the Creek philosopher and the grassroots politician into the archetype of protean, wandering, legendary American hero of the Munchausen Espiegelgen breed is an important and fascinating chapter in the annals of American hero-making. In The Gentleman from the Cane, ring-tailed boar is superimposed upon the comic backwoodsman, who is essentially the droll Yankee with more guts and gusto and less guile to become the gamecock of the wilderness. Because of his many-sidedness, his lively, humorous, homespun figure has supplanted the romantic frontiersman of the Daniel Boone type as the heroic version of the poor white. It rivals any other American hero. Thus, in his gumption, he outdoes the older contemporary, Mike Fink, who he resembles as a game hog, an Indian fighter to whose tough guy he plays a smart aleck among backwoods boasters. In his role in the crackerbox philosopher and storyteller politician, the coonskin congressman anticipates Lincoln, although with Crockett storytelling was a business more than an art, the business of being a wag and a good fellow. While electioneering, the colonel always conciliates every crowd into which he may be thrown by the narration of some anecdotes. It is his manner more than his anecdote which delights you. Pursuing this course, he laughs away any prejudice which may exist against him, and having created a favorsome impression, and forces his claims by local arguments, showing the bearing of great national questions upon the interests of persons whom he wishes to represent. This mode, together with the faculty of being a boon companion in everyone he meets, generally enables him to accomplish his object. The anecdotes of Crockett's Washington adventures show the irrepressible woodsman, playing up the accepted notion of himself as a rustic wag and wisecracker, a role in which he seems to have been victim partly of his own ambition and good nature, and partly of the designs of political friends and foes. Yet in his speeches in Congress, where he served 3 terms between 1827 and 1835, he is a sincere, plain-spoken champion of the people, with an occasional stroke of hard-hitting sarcasm. Sirs, I do not consider it good sense to be sitting here passing laws for Andrew Jackson to laugh at. It is not even good nonsense. Out of those that the President has got about him, I have never seen but one honest countenance since I have been here, and he has just resigned. In the autobiographical comic prose epics ascribed to him, 1833 to 1836, he becomes our first Southern humorist. From now on, laughter gains an ascendancy, and the horse sense gives way to horseplay. Posthumously, he plays the buffoon in the Crockett Almanacs, 1835 to 1856, where his heroics are swallowed up in a slapstick and hokum. Hoax, legend, myth, and caricature, he thus runs the gamut of the poor but honest farmer who made good on his own wits and go-aheadedness. Be sure you're always right, then go ahead. To the comrade who totes the thunder in his fist and flings the lightning in his fingers. Somewhere between these, the 2 extremes, the real Crockett has been lost. Even the stock figure of the backwoods bully and boaster yields to the rip-roar Superman of the joke books, whose tedium is relieved by the occasional flash of vernacular prose poetry or comic sublimity, as in Crockett's Morning Hunt. Folk memories of Crockett lingered in occasional hunting yarns in the South. Throughout the following sketches, Crockett is essentially the hunter in pursuit of even bigger and better game, from varmints and politicians to challenging elements. Nowhere in the backwoods mythology more alive than in Crockett's encounters with his animal friends and foes, in which Crockett is half varmint, and every varmint is half Crockett. 4. Mike Fink. In one of the Crockett Almanacs, we read of a shooting match between Crockett and Mike Fink, a hell ferocious fellow, and an almighty fine shot, in which the former lost by default. First, Crockett aimed at 150 yards, and the ball cut off both the old tomcat's ears close to his head, and shaved the hair clean off across the skull, as slick as if it had been done by a razor, and the critter never stirred, nor knew he had lost his ears until he tried to scratch them. Next, Mike aimed at a sow with a litter of pigs around her, away and further off on the other end of the world, and kept loading and firing for dear life, till he hadn't left one of the pigs enough tail to make a toothpick on. Then Crockett mended Mike's shots, for which he had left one of the pigs but an inch of a tail, and cut off the rest of it, as if it had been drove off with a hammer. That made Mike kinder sorter wrathy, and he sends a ball after his wife, and she is going to spring after a gourd full of water, and knocked half her comb out of her head, without stirring her hair, and calls out to her to stop for me to take the blizzard, as what was left on it. Angel Forrest's critter stood still as a scarecrow in a cornfield, and she got used by Mike's tricks along practice. No, no, Mike, says I. Davy Crockett's hand would be sure to shake if his iron war pointed in the 100-mile of a she-male, and I'd give up beat, Mike. These feats of marksmanship are in the true Mike Fink tradition, which range from driving nails with bullets to shooting tin cups and scalps off of a head. Mike's unique claim to fame among deadshots lay in the fact that most of his shooting wagers were sadistic pranks. For as a bully and cut-up hellbent for fun, Mike had more in common with the pseudo-bad men of the West than he ever had with river pirates and common ruffians among whom he moved. Unlike the frontier rascals who thought that even a crime might take on an aspect of a good joke, Michael was willing to carry a joke to the point of it becoming a crime. He was quite impartial in his choice of victims, shooting off a darkie's heel because he disliked the shape of forcing his woman to lie down on a pile of leaves for which he set fire to cure her of looking at other men. Born of Scotch-Irish parents at the old Fort Pitt in 1770, Mike Pitt in his youth acquired the reputation as an Indian scout, the best shot in Pittsburgh. As the country filled up and the Indians were pushed across the lakes and beyond the Mississippi, wrote Morgan Neville in The Last of the Boatmen, 1829, many of the scouts, from a strong attachment for the erratic mode of life, joined the boatmen, just becoming a distinct class. Among them he soon distinguished himself, not only as a snapping turtle in the Ohio, but also as a demigod of the rivers, and whom, according to Bernard de Votto, Casanova, together with Paul Bunyan, merged into Thor. It was a perpetual fight on the boatmen with the river that made reckless savages. Among the various types of river craft, the keelboat offered the greatest challenge for a boatman's strength, skill, and endurance. In ascending the river, it was a continued series of toil, rendered in some irksome by the snail-like rate at which they moved. The boat was propelled by poles against which the shoulder was placed, and the whole strength and skill of the individual was applied in this manner. As the boatmen moved along the running board, and their heads nearly touching the plank on which they walked, the effect produced on the mind of an observer similar to that of one beholding an ox, rocking before an overloaded cart. Their bodies, naked to their waists for the purpose of moving with greater ease and enjoying the breeze of the river, were exposed to the burning suns of summer and the rain of the autumn. After a hard day's push, they would take their filet, rather ration of whiskey, and having swallowed a miserable supper of meat half burnt and of bread half baked, stretch themselves without covering on the deck, and slumber till the steersman's call invited them to the morning filet. Notwithstanding this, the boatman's life had charms as irresistible as those presented by the splendid illusion of the stage. Sons abandoned their comfortable farms of their fathers, and apprentices fled from the service of their masters. There was a captivation in the idea of going down the river, and the youthful boatman who had pushed the keel from New Orleans felt the pride of a young merchant after the first voyage of an English seaport. From an exclusive association together, they had formed a kind of slang peculiar to themselves, and in the constant exercise of wit with the squatters on shore, the crews of other boats, they acquired a quickness and smartness of vulgar retort that was quite amusing. The frequent battles they were engaged in with the boatmen of different parts of the river, and with the less civilized inhabitants of the lower Ohio and Mississippi, invested them with the ferocious reputation which has made them spoken of throughout Europe. In the same year that Noah Ludlow introduced the Hunters of the Kentucky to the people of New Orleans, Mike Fink became as one of Ashley's men in the service of the Mounted Fur Company, for as the supremacy of the steamboat was established, the flatboatmen and keelboatmen turned in their other fields. Some went to work on the steamboats, others became raftsmen, and still others, like Mike Fink, joined the trapping and trading expeditions across the Rockies. At Fort Henry in Montana, this champion marksman, hunter, and fighter and lover of boaster and jester was killed in a scrimmage, in which the various types of prowess were called to play.